Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is a 2-week update. I know I haven't filmed in a little bit. I have just had a lot going on. Basically we started looking for houses and that's been exciting but also really stressful because the housing market here is ridiculous. So we've kind of been dealing with looking at mortgages, picking a realtor, looking at houses. So I think in some areas houses are only on the market for 4 days. So kind of have to be on top of not only looking for them, but trying to go see them in person. So that's what we've been doing. Haven't been reading a lot. It's just been super hard to concentrate. But anyway, so I guess I have 6 books to talk to you about today that I've finished since last time. So, like always, we'll move from the lowest to the highest rated. These are basically all 3.5 or 4 stars, so really narrow range here. But before we get started, leave some sort of mythology-related emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. So we'll start with some 3.5 star books, and the first book I'll talk about today is The Witch Collector by Charissa Weeks. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this came out November 2nd. So this is an adult fantasy where we follow Raina, who wants to kill the Frost King and his witch collector who stole her sister. On collecting day, a more sinister threat arises, and it turns out the collector is the only one who can help Raina save her sister. They obviously must band together to save the Frost King or let their empire fall to the enemy. So I liked this, but it did take me a while to finish it. And like I said, I've had a lot of things going on, so I don't know if that's, one of the big parts of why it took me forever to finish this, or if I just kind of struggled. I do think it was mostly gripping, but I did lose focus in the middle to the point where I wasn't really sure where the plot was going to end. I think it's pretty easy to read though, and I did like the general ideas, and I would be interested in continuing this series. It feels like a good book to read in the winter because, of this Frost Kingdom setting. We have different types of magic here. There's, fire, frost, healing, shadow magic, so a nice variety. But I also really liked how in this world magic is basically sung, and this is particularly interesting in regards to how it changes with Raina, and I'll get to that momentarily. We do also have some gods in this world as well to add some extra intrigue, and we do have, again, this creepy shadow magic that plays an interesting role in things. I liked how it goes from being sort of this small-scale revenge type quest to learning more about the wider picture and implications worldwide. Raina is a very enjoyable main character, I thought. She is mute, so she actually sings by using sign language, and I think this was a really interesting idea, and I liked seeing this representation. I enjoyed how she wants to kill this witch collector to stop anyone else from her village from being taken, and she also obviously wants to rescue her sister. I think she can be stubborn and loyal, but I think her heart is in the right place. I was also very intrigued just by her background and her powers, and I definitely want to find out more about what she can do. I liked the kind of slowish burn enemies to lovers romance here. I definitely felt the chemistry between them, and obviously we have Alexis, who's our witch collector, and he's got some depth to him, and he's not as evil as he initially seems. I think he has reasons behind why he does things, and he ultimately does want to help people and protect the kingdom. But we do spend most of the time with them as they journey across the kingdom, and we get to see different locations, and I thought that was fun. We also have a Shadow Prince as an enemy. He seems rather mysterious and evil, and I certainly want to know more about him and his goals. I think this character and Raina do have a bit of a connection, and I really want to explore this idea. I also liked getting the lore, like I mentioned, with all the different gods here, and I really want to see where this goes, especially after certain events at the end. So I enjoyed this book. I think if you enjoyed things like From Blood and Ash, fantasy romance type of books, you'll probably enjoy this as well. So, like I said, I had a pretty good time with it and would certainly recommend it. The next 3.5 star book I'll talk about is Murder Most Actual by Alexis Hall. So I also received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out November 9th. So this is an adult mystery following a true crime podcaster and her wife who go to a hotel in the Scottish Highlands to rekindle their marriage, but then they find themselves in the midst of an Agatha Christie-esque murder mystery. So I thought this was pretty enjoyable overall, and I did like the references to Clue. Not only are there chapter titles, it's so-and-so in this location with this object, so I thought that was really fun. But there's also locations within the hotel itself, as well as little tidbits about, things like the Colonel was in a mustard colored room, or, things like that are clearly in reference to Clue. I thought this was really funny and kind of a little bit cheesy, but it's the sort of cheesiness that I enjoy. I thought the pacing was okay. There are certainly moments of danger and excitement, but there's also some moments digging into our main character's relationship, which did sometimes drag a bit. I felt like it was trying to both be like this closed circle, like locker room type of mystery, as well as a romance, and it just didn't quite blend those together enough for me, I guess. I did like this setting, though. We are, snowed in at the hotel, and I obviously liked this closed circle, locked room type of element. I think it does get a little bit silly at times with some conspiracies, but it's pretty amusing overall. It definitely has some funny moments, but obviously does have some serious ones because our characters are dealing with some marriage issues. I liked this mystery, and I didn't actually guess who did it, so that was fun. Our main character, Liza, is enjoyable overall. I like how she has this true crime podcast and that she wants to solve these murders that are happening around her. She's smart, but she's obviously not a professional detective, so it's interesting to see her investigate and, where she goes wrong sometimes. We do get some nice moments where she and her wife, Hannah, work on their relationship. They've been married a while and have drifted apart, so I like seeing, whether these events taking place around them bring them closer together or not. I liked seeing Hannah realize some things about Liza and try to be supportive of her. I also enjoyed Ruby in particular. She's a mysterious woman at the hotel, and I found her to be pretty funny and, brazen. The rest of the characters are kind of a mix of personalities. We have a private investigator, there's some wealthy people, there's a clergyman, there's a professor, and even more. So I like seeing how everybody is connected, if they are connected, and as well as, whether or not they're based on somebody from Clues. So overall, I had a pretty fun time with this and would certainly recommend it, especially if you do enjoy, this closed circle, locked room type of mystery, and if you also enjoy Clue. So this, I think, is a Kobo original, and I don't know, I think they may have an app, so if you don't have a Kobo, you can still read the book. I could be wrong about that, but certainly worth looking into. But like I said, I had a good time with this and would recommend it. So now we get into 4-star books. The first book I'll talk about here is The Mythic Dream, and this is an anthology of adult sci-fi and fantasy retellings of myths from a variety of cultures around the world. So I buddy read this with Angela from Literature Science Alliance, and I thought this was a very good anthology overall. I liked the mix of stories, there are some that I was more familiar with, and as well as some that were new to me. It's often pretty diverse with some mixed settings. There's some that are futuristic, others are more in line, I think, with the original myths, others are just more modern, in our day and age. So there's definitely some standout stories here. There's some stories that I didn't like or didn't get, some were just fine, but I think the majority I felt pretty good about, and that's why I rated this 4 stars, so it's certainly a very good anthology. I don't want to talk about all of the 18 stories because we'd be here forever, but I will mention a few just because I thought these were fun. These were the ones that I think liked a bit more. The first one I'll talk about is Phantoms of the Midway. This was by Shauna Maguire. So I thought this was an interesting retelling of Hades and Persephone. I don't think I would have necessarily known it without the author's note. I liked that we get the circus setting. She, I think, does this pretty well. There's some circus settings in the Encrypted series that I really liked. And it turns out I think she actually grew up in the circus type setting, so that was really interesting. But anyway, this is kind of a sad story, but I did like the resolution. It's, I think, all about choice in growing up. Her writing is great, always. I'm not surprised that I enjoyed this. I typically enjoy Shauna Maguire's writing. And it felt like it told a complete snippet of a story, and, I would certainly read more in this world and with the story, but I do feel satisfied with what we get. The next story I'll talk about is Fisher-Bird by T. Kingfisher. This is probably my favorite of the stories. I'm, again, not surprised because I do like T. Kingfisher's writing. So this is a retelling of Hercules, and it's kind of told in, a modern setting. And I imagine Fisher-Bird as an older woman from the South. So this was entertaining, especially when Fisher-Bird gets Stronger, who's our Hercules character, to do some silly tasks. I think Fisher-Bird is pretty smart and funny, and I liked how helpful she is and how she actually gets revenge along the way. So it's fun to see the labors of Hercules retold and updated to the setting. For instance, the Hydra is basically a whole bunch of cottonmouths, and I thought that was a really fun way to, adapt this to the modern age. So really liked this one. The next one I'll talk about is Bridge of Crows. I think this is by J.Y. Yang. So this is a retelling of the Cowherd and the Weaver Girl, I think, which is not something that I'm familiar with, but I thought this was a really interesting story. And it has a story within a story mechanism, which I thought was a fun way to tell this. There's I think some giant creepy crows. It was, I don't know, I could be wrong about what actually happened there. But it seemed like a really interesting setting with both sci-fi and fantasy elements, and I would actually read a story following, where this story ends up. So this was just, a fun one that I wasn't super familiar with. Then there was Wild to Covet by Sarah Gailey. Now this was interesting because I've read some books, I think maybe just the one by Sarah Gailey, and didn't really enjoy it, so I'm surprised that I enjoyed this one so much. It did take me a little bit to realize that this is kind of a retelling of Achilles and his mother, and I did like the author's note in here in particular. So this is basically like a parent's identity doesn't necessarily have to be tied to the child, and Thetis is kind of a badass here. I loved seeing her strength and how she refuses to give in. And it was also interesting to see this adapted to a more modern time. Then there's like this funky one, which is Cuidado que viene el coco. So this is, I think, just based on Legends of El Coco, and this is by Carlos Hernandez. So this was super weird, but I actually really enjoyed it. There's like coconut heads and removing heads and just like all sorts of bizarre things going on. So I think this could have been a really creepy idea, but it actually ended up pretty sweet and charming. I liked the setting. It takes place on a ship, and there's this AI character, and I feel like this would have actually been a really interesting idea to explore in another story, perhaps as like a horror or thriller. But here, it was really great. I loved getting to know our like main character, Nadano, or Julio. He has a bit of a rough background, but he wants to be a good parent for his baby, and I think this kind of gets into the idea of addressing the worries that a first-time parent has. And again, I really liked this AI character. She's actually a therapist, and I thought they had a pretty good bond. So yeah, funky story, but I really liked it. There's Kali Na by Indra Pramit Das. So this is just a retelling of Kali. So this has like more of a cyberpunk setting, and it's this fun retelling, and I liked how there's like VR elements involved, and like trolls on the internet actually have like a physical presence in this space, and I thought that was a cool idea. I liked getting to see this AI stand up for itself and, not take harassment. So I also like seeing Durga kind of gain more confidence in herself and try to fight against like the hate. So I feel like this was really relevant to kind of the modern age with the internet, just dealing with some of the toxicity that you can encounter on the internet. And kind of on that note, there's also Live Stream by Alyssa Wong. This might be my second favorite. I did really like this, but this is a retelling of Artemis and Actaeon. So I've read some short stories from Alyssa Wong before and have really enjoyed them, so I wasn't super surprised that I really liked this. It's a very satisfying retelling, and again, pretty relevant for today. It kind of addresses online harassment for women, especially in gaming. So this, I think, I was able to relate to Diana's anxiety in certain aspects, and I loved the idea of just like women bonding together for support. And then the last one I'll talk about is Florilegia. This is by Amal El Motar, I think. So I think this is a retelling of Bloodwed, and I was like vaguely familiar with this. I think some of these aspects kind of come up with the October Day series by Shauna McGuire. But anyway, this was pretty interesting. It's basically like a woman who's made from plants, and I really like this involvement with nature, and there's some meaning behind certain plants, and I think that's always a really interesting idea. But it's basically really cool to get to see her take charge and like how she wants more for herself than just being a wife to her husband, and I think it's really about being who you're meant to be. So I thought this was a really great story. I'm kind of interested in checking out some other stories by these authors that I've mentioned who I have not read. Obviously, I'll continue to read Shauna McGuire and T. Kingfisher, but some of the others I would like to look into a little bit more. But yeah, so those were, I think, some of the standout stories for me. Like I said, there are certainly some that I didn't particularly enjoy, but I think overall this is a very solid anthology, especially if you enjoy myths and legends and retellings like I do, so I would definitely recommend this. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out November 16th. So this is an adult sci-fi novella following Liness, who's the lowly fourth daughter of the queen, and she's just always getting in the way. There's a demon terrorizing the land, and the only way to save her people is to invoke the pact between her family and the elder sorcerer who inhabits a local tower. However, it turns out this elder is not actually a sorcerer, and he's forbidden to help. So I thought this was a fun novella, and I really liked the blend of sci-fi and fantasy elements here. It's definitely a sci-fi setting. There are for sure sci-fi elements, but a lot of this has a traditional fantasy structure, I think. There's definitely some interesting ideas here, and I think that's pretty consistent with all of Adrian Tchaikovsky's books that I've read so far. There's really wild ideas, and I have no idea how he comes up with all of these things, but it's really intriguing. And I think this brings up a lot of questions that do remain unanswered for now, so I'm really hoping that we get more novellas or books in this universe to kind of explore things more. I think the pricing was pretty good overall. It obviously drops you right in. It is a novella, but I think it does a really good job setting up the world, and I feel pretty satisfied with the story. And again, like I said, I do hope that we get more adventures here. I liked the idea of how advanced technology can seem like magic. This is a theme that comes up quite a bit throughout this novella. It does also deal with things like depression and feeling alone, but I think it handles these in a really nice way. There's also some interesting ideas with evolution, both culturally and physically, with how things can change after people arrive on a planet. So it's really fun to see how, certain things can be adapted into like mystical items or family sigils or things like that. So in terms of our characters, Lynn is pretty adventurous, and she's trying to prove her worth to her family as a royal to get past their perception of her being useless. I thought she was very brave, and I liked how she wants to do what's right. We have Near, who is the elder, and he's the last of his kind. He's able to actually separate his feelings from rational thought, but this can cause some issues as he's dealing with some heavy things. I really like seeing how they help each other and how they work together, because I think their interactions were a very strong point of this novella. So I definitely had a really good time with this and would certainly recommend it. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is Lore Olympus, Volume 1 by Rachel Smythe. So this is an adult graphic novel retelling of Hades and Persephone. It actually just came out, I think, last week. So this collects the first 25 episodes of the webtoon comic, which I haven't read before, and it does actually have an exclusive extra episode at the end. So I thought this is a really fun way to retell this story. It's very colorful. There's often shades of pink, purple, and blue, as you can kind of see on the cover. I liked the art style overall as well, and I think this has a really interesting world setup. Like, Olympus seems more like a modern world, but they can visit the mortal world, which appears to be a little bit less advanced. Like, it seems to be more of a historical setting, like, with, like, I don't know, the ancient Greece. So that was kind of cool. I liked the general story, though I will say there were some episodes that kind of came out of nowhere, though I think they did eventually tie in. It does have some darker themes at times for sure, though. There's sexual assault, there's like drugging a drink, etc. So be aware of that. I think there was actually a list of, content warnings at the beginning, so that was kind of nice. But anyway, in terms of our characters, Persephone is definitely naive, but she seems really sweet. Hades is quite entertaining. He seems much more gentlemanly than Zeus or Poseidon, certainly. I definitely feel their chemistry and want them to get together. I feel like they'd just be super cute. And I also like how Hades has a bunch of dogs. I love that part so much. Hera seems interesting as well. Like, she doesn't seem nearly as vindictive, I think, as she's often portrayed in mythology. I really like how supportive she and Hades are of each other. And then we also have, obviously there's a whole bunch of gods here, but we have Artemis, who's Persephone's roommate here. She seems very protective and could be a good friend to Persephone. Eros, I think, makes some questionable decisions here because he's in a tough place, but I feel like he could redeem himself, so I'm interested to see what happens with him. Apollo and Aphrodite are definitely not nice, though, and make some very horrible choices, and I don't like them. But this was a really quick read. It's a graphic novel. I'm not surprised. I just flew through it, and I definitely want the next volume, which I think the next collected volume comes out in the summer next year or something like that. But I definitely want to get the collected versions instead of reading them online, just because I think this looks really nice and it's a fun way to experience the story. So yeah, this was my first time reading this. I don't know how many people have read the webtoon comic or not, but I would certainly recommend this. I think it came out in both hardback and paperback, just FYI, I guess. So yeah, would recommend this. The last 4-star book I'll talk about today is the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. So this is adult paranormal romance where Vivian drunkenly curses her ex after a breakup using an orchard hayride candle. So she's, obviously not really thinking that's going to do anything. However, 9 years later, Reese, her ex, returns to Graves Glen, Georgia to recharge the town's ley lines since he's a descendant of the town's ancestors, but things don't go well and calamity strikes. So this causes Vivi to realize her silly Ex Hex wasn't so harmless after all, and Reese and Vivi must work together to stop the curse before it's too late. So this was pretty cute and charming. It's definitely good for the fall because we do have this harvest festival type setting. and timing, I guess. I think the pacing was good overall as well. It definitely starts off on a very amusing note because we actually get to see the breakup and her like wallowing in, in the bathtub drinking vodka, and, we get to see her doing the curse. So I thought that was highly amusing. I do think it feels a little bit rushed towards the end, but overall I feel pretty satisfied with the story. It was certainly kept me wanting to read. I like how we have this small town vibe here. Witches live alongside humans in secret, and I also liked how the local college has both like mundane and magical parts to it. There are some amusing ideas here like possessed toys and talking cats, but it turned out to not be as big of a part as I expected, just because like the synopsis actually does explicitly mention that. So I kind of assumed that would play more of a role, and it really didn't, but that was fine. It does have a humorous tone to it in general as well. In terms of our characters, Vivi is a fun main character. I can understand certainly the feeling of a bad breakup and wanting to curse your ex. She seems pretty smart and has some skill with magic. So what's interesting here is that she has kind of this heritage where her mom was good at magic but is kind of against it. So Vivi is not as natural at using it as her cousin and aunt are. So I do kind of wonder if we'll get to see her embrace her witchy side a little bit more in future books. I do notice, at least on Goodreads, that this says that's the first book in a series, so hopefully that's actually true. In terms of the romance, I certainly feel the chemistry between Vivi and Rhys. I was definitely rooting for them to get back together. So this is a second chance romance. Rhys is not as terrible as he seems initially. He does have some family pressure that explains why he acts in certain ways at times. And I do like how he gets called out for being a little bit too flippant at times. He seems sweet, and I do like how invested he gets with Vivi. I really liked watching them work together to try to fix the curse. And then we also get a few other characters like Gwen and Elaine. So this is Vivi's cousin and aunt, and they both seemed much more inclined for magic. I liked how supportive they are of Vivi and how they run this witchy shop. Like, there are some magical items, but it's mostly like non-magical items, like tarot cards for normal people, so I thought that was really fun. But I'm actually kind of wondering if we'll get to follow Gwen in a future book. Like, that's typically what happens with, paranormal romance series, where you just kind of follow different characters over time. So I'm curious to see if we'll follow Vivi again, or if we'll, move on to Gwen perhaps. But yeah, definitely had a good time with this. If you're looking for just like a really fun fall witchy paranormal romance, I would definitely suggest picking this up. So with that, those are all the books that I have to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of them or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, just let me know how you've been doing for the past couple of weeks. So I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link's in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.